Um, Robert, do you want to say anything to start off?
Yeah, I would make sure we're all set. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight and taking the time to be with us, as you are all the time, to be a sounding board for us and for us to impart a little things that we've looked into that's important to, tens of thousands of people up here that you represent. So I greatly appreciate your time and being with us. I think we'll turn it over to Tom now to start probably to go with a list of questions that I think we have to at least start around on it.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank everybody and welcome everybody that's taken their time out of their busy schedule to log on tonight. I believe that one of the responsibilities of all school board members is to work with other elected officials on behalf of their school districts and the students of their community. That's what tonight is all about, our commitment to do what's best for the students of our community. And that's a goal that all of us that are here tonight share. Over the last 20 years, I've been part of these discussions with state representatives, and we've had numerous disagreements, and that's to be expected. On behalf of the SBI Legislative Committee, I'd ask that everyone treat each other with respect and to listen to what's being said. To start the discussion, I'd like to invite our guests, the Assemblymen and Assemblywomen here, to take 2 minutes to introduce themselves, since I know we have some new school board members here in the audience. And I'd like to invite our guests to go in alphabetical order: Assemblywoman Buttonshine, Assemblyman Miller, Assemblyman Salka, and Assemblyman Smullen. So would you like to start off, Assemblywoman Buttonshine? Introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm Mary Ann Buttonshine. Married a gentleman with the last name of a B, so I'm lucky I go first here. So thank you so much again for all you're doing. I sincerely appreciate it. I understand the challenges that you're facing, and so many of them you overcome on your own, and that is something that is due noted in Albany and sincerely appreciated. So yesterday, I sit on 2 committees that relate to our area of discussion this evening. Yesterday was a budget hearing for primary and secondary education. And as I had come on earlier and talked to some of you, it is so important. My role within that committee is the budget that was proposed through the executive branch yesterday, testimony starting with Commissioner Rosa, talking about the importance of what type of changes you need, as well as many of your colleagues. And some of the great key points that were brought up is certification and the concerns of her lack of staff to be able to handle the quick process of certification. And as you know, or possibly not, as you stated, Tom, there's many new members here. This is a question that's asked every year of the state education department. Can you tell me why you're understaffed? So 2 years we put money in the budget for the staffing to occur. Last year we put money in the budget, and clearly at this point you shouldn't have to be facing those issues. So it is very concerning. There was conversation talked about opportunity programs. And this is something that is so important, as they identify them as opportunity programs. I identify them as after-school programs, and in the sense of what, not only are you providing that education during the day, but you're also providing, again, a safe and healthy environment for so many of our students after the school hours, and some even before the school hours. So the importance of the collaboration. I have spent the last 4 months working with family court judges in the community, school principals, parents, advocates, probation, of how do we ensure that our children are safe. And all the fingers point to you because you're the experts. But again, we can't expect you to do that unless you have the funding. Another point of discussion, obviously, was foundation aid, which, as you know, Most of you probably look at it at a point that, again, is sustainable for this year. But the concern that we clearly see is how will you move forward within strategic planning over the next 3, 5, 10 years in making sure that you have those needs. Mental health, an issue, again, that is so important to all of you. Again, you're in the world of academia and education, but mental health is such an important piece that was discussed yesterday. As we continue to look at, and I don't see Brian Belair on, but I see Mike Head from Whitesboro, is the due process discussion. Well, I did get a response from the commissioner. I know that this group has asked. I know that superintendents continue to ask, is that burden of proof that you have to place on yourselves and ensure that those attorneys that you hire have to be paid. It is a very expensive cost for all of your schools. So she listened yesterday. That question is brought up annually, and clearly she is aware of the concerns. So we did see some leeway and headway in that aspect. I represent the Utica, Rome, Whitestown, Marcy, Frankfurt, and Floyd area. So some school districts kind of blend a little bit, but some of them obviously are strong and clear there. I have a little piece of Holland Patton, maybe a touch of individuals that would attend the Sequoia schools, as well as Central Valley. But other than that, within the Whitesboro School District, Rome, Utica, Oriskany, New York Mills, I think that Brian and I kind of, as far as residents that attend. So it is so important, in my opinion, that we look at this as a regional approach. And as my colleagues will speak tonight, we're very fortunate that we can work together and come together to help support in all means possible. It's exciting to hear about the LPN nursing programs that you've got to ensure that they're rooted in education. And I know that all of you, whether it's CTE, special ed, ELL, anything that you're bringing forward, I understand the end result is our economic development within the area. So I thank you as you start these programs and continue to grow, and I will turn it over to my colleagues. I apologize if I went over in time, but again, hearing was about 10 hours and I could.
Uh-oh. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a small enough group. We can make this into conversation. Assemblyman Miller, would you like to spend a couple minutes just introducing yourself?
Okay, this is my sixth time on this forum, and thank you for having me. I'm Brian Miller. I represent the 101st District, which goes from New Hartford to Little Falls, straight down to Orange County. I always tell everybody it goes down to Kingdom Come, all the way down there. So I have many BOCES districts. I have a huge amount of schools, and we all share the same problems from here to Orange County. And all the issues are all very similar. But there's one thing that was said yesterday during the budget hearing. It was on the foundation aid formula, and I found this the first time I've heard this from any commissioner, and from Commissioner Rosa said that they requested 1.2 million to do a top to bottom review of the foundation aid formula. And I'm glad that was brought up and it was said, and that's something that we all need to do. We all need to, that we've talked about this many times. But, one of the things I am really concerned about is the recovery aid in, where the schools are going to go on that. We talked about that this afternoon with the ONC BOCES, and we had more of a roundtable discussion than question and answer, which I thought was very, very good. And there was something else that we did through that group, and I'm going to ask this group to do it. This is my request, that we meet quarterly. I think I've asked this before, that we pick 2 or 3 topics that, and there's all types of issues that are very, very important to us, but we need to pinpoint 2 or 3 and just work on those. But I'll stop here and I'll let you go on to Mr. Selka and Mr. Smellen. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. First of all, thank you for the invitation. My name is John Salka. I represent the 121st District, which is all about Madison County, most about Otsego County, and a small portion in the southern part of Oneida County. And I also had the honor of being a school board member for 7 years, and 4 of those I served as board president for Brookfield Central School. I understand how much dedication it requires to spend on such important issues as educating our children. Education and healthcare are the 2 biggest line items in the New York State budget, 90 billion and I think this year 31 billion respectively. And there's a lot of work to do when you're dealing with figures that big, with dollars of that size. And the governor, our new governor, has some very worthwhile proposals in this year's budget that we are ready to give every consideration to. In particular, we see the increase in funding for education. We're finally starting to realize the state's commitment on foundation aid, which I remember back when, years ago, that was a big issue. So the state's finally started to realize their commitment, and that's good news for education. But of course, the challenges are what they are. We're looking at times that we've never, ever experienced before. Education's taken it squarely on the jaw with the pandemic. Folks have done a fantastic job of continuing a quality education for our children. But again, it's been a challenge, and I look forward to working with yourselves and what I call the X listen to respond appropriately, to make sure that we go back to our state capital with ideas that we acquire from this group and other groups, and see how we can all do a better job together. Thanks.
Oh, good evening, everyone. It's Robert Smell. I represent the 118th Assembly District. I know many of you. It's great to see everybody from Herkimer BOCES. I just wanted to, I know my colleagues have covered a lot of ground already, but one of the things I want to make sure that we discuss, and it's particularly important, 118th Assembly District, Fulton, Hamilton, Upper Herkimer, 6 towns in Oneida, 9 towns in St. Lawrence County, 46 towns, 13 villages, 2 small cities, 26 school districts, 5 different BOCES clusters. So I get to see
a partridge in a pear tree.
And a partridge in a pear tree. That's right. And one of the concerns I have that's in the budget actually is the governor's requirement by 2027 that new buses, new or leased, are electric or hydrogen. I'm on the NCON committee. I'm the ranker. I follow energy issues very closely. I don't see how we're going to get there. So I'm always in favor of good new technology, but I'm afraid that we've put an idea out there that's going to be very expensive compared to the existing fleet, and particularly onerous on small rural school districts that drive a lot of miles. In this case, the technology may or may not be mature. So something that we really want to, really want to keep an eye on it as a technologist, but very crucial to the support of our education system. So look forward to the dialogue, and great to see everyone.
Thank you. I've heard some good things. You've addressed some of the topics that we wanted to talk to tonight, that we wanted to talk about tonight. First topic, I think, was assigned to Doug Guston, but he apparently is having some difficulty logging in. So I'll kind of take his question. And of course, it's about the foundation formula. I'll address it to you, Assembly Member Buttenshine. Actually, Assemblyman Blankenbush was supposed to be here tonight, so he's one letter before you. So alphabetically, he would come before you, but he had some difficulties, I guess, coming tonight. But about foundation aid, so I guess the question is, we're interested in what do you all see in the probability that, in fact, the foundation aid will be implemented over 3 years, and what kinds of new metrics are going to be instituted in the foundation formula to address the increased needs that all of us are seeing with students and increased poverty that we're having. And how do you see the foundation formula adjusting to meet the needs of the schools in upstate, in the Mohawk Valley?
I can say, excellent question, and thank you. It's definitely a work in progress. In the important aspect in regards to what your needs are. And I think the key word that frustrates most of us is when they say, well, fully fund it. Well, what does that actually mean when you talk to an accountant or Dr. Timms or someone that spends quite a bit of time and research in this area? And I know that your group has put forth what they see as the important aspect, the School Boards Association, in regards to what needs to be done. One good thing, expense aid is not included this year. As you know, last year that was a major hurdle to pull it back out. But at the same token, when you talk about Sandy's clapping, but it's still, I hate to say it, a word game, you know, in regards to how do we make sure that what is being done is done in a manner, I think, clearly with your conversation of what do we do to talk about ensuring you get what you need. And those needs have to be determined at your level. The state can't dictate it. I know that the funding aspects that are discussed in regards to the needs of doing a full overhaul of the foundation aid formula to determine what can be done and how it should be done. I've already talked to my colleagues on the education committee and stated the most important people that need to be on there are folks like you, our superintendents, the school board members, our teachers that really know what needs to be done. We don't need legislators on there. What we need is you. So that's clearly there's a conversation of how we're going to move forward with, as you identify, possibly as a task force to take a look at it. And it also needs to be done quickly. You've been dealing with this for many years, and you don't need this to drag out over and over again. So I am hopeful and optimistic that the conversation will move to the needs that have to be met. But I think, as I spoke earlier this evening, how important it is that when you write your mission statements, they just don't include the transmission of knowledge, as we would talk primarily in education. You cover so many facets at this point and are responsible for so much. I'm sure you've heard of the legislation that so many of my colleagues and I have continued to receive, in the importance of putting a school psychologist or social worker in every building. Well, again, times have changed so drastically within the field of education that, rightfully so, my husband is a retired school psychologist. You know what I mean? I see the importance of it. But at the same token, we need to really make sure it's clear that a district tells us what they need, not us advising a district of what they need.
Assemblyman Miller, I mean, you can, I don't want people to feel like they have to respond, but I certainly want to give everybody time to add anything to that question.
Well, excuse me. Well, I think Mary Ann explained it very, very well. We all know this is that this formula is very complex, and you know, we haven't had an opportunity to sit down and work it out, you know, the exact formula, but it has to come with help from all of you. Okay, we're not the experts on this. You guys, all of you are the experts on this. You know, when it does come time to sit down and work it out, we need to ensure that each and every district is getting their fair share so they can best serve the needs of their specific populations. So, you know, this, you know, when we rework this formula, we got to make sure that it isn't more complex than it already is. We need to simplify this formula. But, you know, that's where we are. I'm glad, like I said before, I'm glad the chancellor has said that she wants to revisit this, and finally we're going to have something done with it.
Assemblyman Salka?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Obviously, the foundation aid formula is a complicated process, to say the least, probably. And I've talked to many superintendents and business managers who've said it's much more complicated than it really needs to be. So it might be a time where we can have an opportunity to reprioritize some of the points of the foundation aid formula. Mary Ann mentioned about her husband being a school psychologist. We all know now, especially in the pandemic, what kind of stress these young people are under and how much there is such a greater need now for support services when it comes to mental health support. So, it's always been a dynamic situation. Education in itself is a dynamic situation, always changing, good ideas, bad ideas in the mix. So, and those are always a matter for debate. But I'm encouraged that more attention is being spent on the foundation aid formula. Gosh, I remember back when the campaign for fiscal equity was fought out, and gap elimination adjustment and education. It's just been such a roller coaster now for so long that I'm hoping that by reevaluating the foundation aid formula, putting it under the microscope again, and realizing that there are good parts to it, and of course there are bad parts to it that need to be kind of jettisoned off. The encouragement, like I said, is that we're taking a closer look at this, and with input from folks like yourself, I think we're going to be able to, I'm optimistic, I think we're going to be able to get together and write a better formula.
Assemblyman Smullen?
Yeah,
Anything
so
you'd like to add?
I'm not I'm the last one to go here. I think what's been said, is good. My comment would be is that I think the money's there, not only this year, next year, but in the out year. And then it'll be up to us to make sure that we continue it. So we don't, one of the things, I've only been in the legislature 3 years, but one of the things I've noticed is that we don't index things, and we let the power of inflation over time, degrade the actual value of the investment. In this case, I view it as an investment. So, if we're going to do something, we need to make sure that it's sustainable in the out years. So all of the school districts, they look at it, and we can adjust the fairness for, city, suburbs, rural school districts, make sure it's all fair, but then keep it so it's consistent, so you have something decent to budget with. Otherwise, I'm an national security, Pentagon budgeteer person. If you don't have consistency, it just, you just get this roller coaster effect. And I just hate to see that done, to our school districts.
Thank you.
I go back and just comment on that again.
Yeah,
while we're on
absolutely.
this.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things we have here, and I think that we forget it down in, or maybe we don't know down in Albany, and some of my colleagues, I don't know how much time they spend in the schools, but we're asking the schools to do so much more with what's going on here with COVID. We're asking the educators to become parents and start working with the children at a younger level. So it puts more requirements on what's going on here. A lot of times we look at schools as being the traditional schools that we went to. We need to get out and talk to everyone here on what's really going on out there. We spent some time over Little Falls a couple weeks ago talking with their staff over there and what they're doing, and they've got some great ways of doing things, but they wanted to make sure that we understood what your needs are. So if we base our financial, our aid packages formula, our financial formula on old traditions, we're going to be dead wrong again, and we're going to be behind the 8 ball moving forward. So, it's really, really important that we listen. That's one of the big things we need to do in Albany. Not talk. We all like to talk. But we need to listen to what your needs truly are and where we're going to be in 2024, 2027, 2035, and we've already put policy in place for 2035 that's going to severely handicap what you guys do in your budgets. So I guess I've said enough. Thank you for letting me butt back in on that one.
Thank you for those comments. We've been asking our staff to build an airplane while it's in flight, and then, oh, we change direction every once in a while on it. So yes, you're absolutely right. Education has changed dramatically, and the COVID crisis has changed things dramatically. So maybe we need to do a better job of inviting you to come into the schools and see exactly what's going on. So thank you for those comments.
Hey, Tom, just real quick, our legislative committee will be meeting and we will be taking a look at the metrics going into the formula, and we'll have some ideas for you to consider for our legislators, okay? So,
That's exactly what we need, Jim. That hits the nail on the head. If you can tell us, because your boots on the ground, you can tell us that we can use whatever resources, whatever influences, if you will, on how that formula is going to be rewritten. So,
and like Assembly Miller
appreciate
said,
that.
a lot of things have changed, so we've got some ideas for those metrics. So thank you.
Great to hear.
Mr. Shipsky, I think you've got a question about broadband capacity. Mr. Shipsky's from Richfield Springs and Herkimer Bosse's. And your mic is off.
That better? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank everybody for being here. It's always great to talk to you guys. I think if COVID did anything, it really brought to the forefront the value of being able to have good internet and to have good cell phone. It's been a real problem for a lot of our small schools up here. I took a quick survey of the schools right down Route 20, Mount Markham, Richfield, and Owen D. Young. And they told me Mount Markham's got close to 100 students either who don't have high-speed internet or have families that have it but are struggling to pay for it, which is the same as not having it. Owen D. Young is running the same problems. As a matter of fact, Owen D. Young, and I know Holly was on here, does not have cell service at their school. And in this day and age, one, that's a safety factor, and two, it's a struggle if you don't have, that capability at your school. Here in Richfield, I know we had at one point 40 families without internet. We were able to get hotspots for them. The road that our family farm is on is 2 miles long. We have high-speed internet on 100 yards on one end of the road and 250 yards in the other end of the road, and the people in the middle are left hanging. And I know there's at least 2 families there with children in school that are very concerned about education and are struggling with it. I know the governor has talked about making this an issue. What do you see happening, and what can you do maybe to help us move this along? Because this has become so important to our students. Thank you.
Yeah, Tom, I was just going to bring that up when you brought up the question from where Tom Moats had left it to transition. I bring it up in every conversation that I'm in, and that's broadband, and that's what to do about it in upstate New York. Like many things, there's a couple complicated issues with it. One having to do with access, which is what we're talking about. Our people don't have access to broadband. Some of them have affordability issues, but in many parts of New York State, in the dense urban areas, the real issue is affordability. There's access and there's plenty of customers to hook up, but there's the inability to afford it. So it's prompted 2 conversations having to do with broadband. One is getting the actual service out there. We're going to be lucky, I think, from the pandemic, in that money is being dedicated to it, not only at the federal level through the FCC, but also about $1.5 billion at the state level. And that'll go, towards people, like you say, when you're on one end of one road and one end of the other, but the last mile, you can't connect. There's going to be last mile connection money that's going to help out. And schools are actually going to be a big part of pushing for it. If we learned anything from the pandemic, is that to do online education, you have to be online. Most people don't prefer it, but it does complement the ability of someone to learn outside of the school, or to do additional learning besides what they're actually learning in the school itself. And what we've done is last year is we passed a study bill that says, okay, we're going to find out who does and who doesn't have it. And the counties are doing a great job of actually going out and finding out who doesn't have it. And the schools are actually paying, a good part of that in connection with their counties. So I think at the end of this year, we'll know who doesn't have it anymore. It was a bit of a red herring, fib that everybody had access if it was in one zip code in upstate New York. Well, we knew that wasn't true. But in this case, I think we're actually going to get to the bottom of it. Who has it at what speed? 0, 5 megabytes per second, 25, 100. The FCC standard is 100. Okay, for most of us, that's really fast speed sort of thing. But that's not fast speed in some areas of the country. So I think we're onto it. And the key thing is that we get control of the process to local entities. The Broadband Program Office still doesn't have the granularity to know what Mount Markham, school district has in their building. They can know it if they need to, but they don't know it. But I'm betting that in Oneida County in broadband study that is being done, that has been commissioned, they're going to know exactly what it is, sort of thing, and they'll be able to make that value judgment and that decision as to where to emphasize the federal and the state funds are coming. And that's where I'm working at in this case. And I've got a bill and all that kind of stuff, but this is a big issue in my district. It's the #1 public service issue in my area. So I always talk about it. So sorry I talk too much, but like Forrest Gump, that's all I've got to say.
Tom, I guess I'll hop on next if that's possible.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sure.
We had a town hall meeting down in Springfield last summer on this. And I guess one of the big questions, we've all identified that broadband is necessary for educational, commerce, business, and another big thing is telehealth, which affects not only the whole community, but schools as a whole. But one of the biggest things we really have to look at is how the broadband's rolled out and how the contracts are rolled out. A lot of the broadband, a lot of the hardline lines, the spectrum, you name it, they're contracted, they do a good job. And then some of the other contractors that we've awarded contracts on don't do such a good job. We got to take a good look back on our contract awarding on that. But broadband is huge. We all understand that. And there's a lot of programs going on out there right now. Mid-York is starting one, trying to get some broadband out there by some shared services. But, that's where we are. We're out talking. I don't know, the governor has in the budget some more money there, but we want to see how it's going to be rolled out. And, it has to go to a technology group. And I know we all have to study this, but we're beyond studying. This has to be done. And maybe some of the money should be put into R&D in how broadband's pushed out there.
Any of our other guests or anybody like to? Oh, sure, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just had to say, I'm concerned in the points that we're seeing in the transportation budget. Because as you know, last year, internet right-of-way charges were charged to our small companies that had started building great internet throughout our rural areas. And I'll use Northland Communications as an example. That clearly a great company in the Holland Patton area went into Westernville. And now in this year's budget, if you don't participate in state funding, then you will not get that waiver. So we're almost contradicting ourselves for someone that wants to steadfast and move forward unless they participate in a state program. The other issue that I see is the $15 internet that was brought forward last year in the budget. again, sounds great. Let's get everyone in that. But I know that one of you, I think it was Robert, you brought up the point in regards to what type of level of broadband you have. To me, if it doesn't work, it's useless, and it only creates frustration on both ends, whether it's the educator or the student. So these two issues need to be addressed this year, because it isn't specific in the sense of looking at it within not only an educational perspective, but clearly those businesses that want to work hard in the state, we have to ensure we reward them for that work if we're going to provide those credits through those right-of-ways that we put through last year, as well as the $15 internet access that if you're just going to sell someone those 100 megahertz or whatever it might be, that's going to be useless and not work. So I see that it is important. We understand it. And the studies, I think Brian's point is right. This started in 2015. 7 years ago is when this was proposed. And how can we still be talking in the sense that we're not there? So thank you.
Assemblyman Salko, would you like to, or anybody else, would you like to voice in on this?
Yeah, just a quick comment is, it's always amazes me that a state that's as sophisticated as New York, with one of the major metropolitan areas of the world, 4 hours from here, how far behind the 8 ball we are on so many of these issues. I'm glad Mary Ann brought up the $15. It was brought up by a few people, but I remember when that was considered, I got a call from my friends over at the Otsego County Electric Co-op, and they said there's no way in hell we can provide that service for $15, per customer. I guess there was a waiver that was being offered, but I mean, we got to be realistic about this. This is very, very expensive to do. And although I'm encouraged by people of low income being able to access, because they have every right to do it as much as anybody else, we got to be realistic, and we have to make sure that this service is provided and it's still cost effective for a company. And of course, there's a regulatory hurdle too. I know that they were having issues with NYSEG and National Grid, giving them permission to use some of their pole space, and they were actually proposing some pretty high fees with those rights. So I mean, there's a lot of things to work out yet, but and I'm glad Brian mentioned telehealth, because in rural areas, telehealth is going to become a key element to providing good health care for especially a lot of our seniors. But it's a work in progress. It seems to be ramping up a bit finally, and I can assure you that this group here of legislators aren't gonna let up on that.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next issue. Mr. Stephen King from New York Mills. I think you have a question about itinerant personnel.
I do. We're a small district and we're very, very reliant on itinerants. This year, we have about 550 students K-12 in our building. We use 8 itinerants at an annual cost in our budget of $484,318, which we get aided on for $240,000 at an aid ratio of 66.5%, giving us aid of $159,600 on those itinerants. We're working with a formula that only allows us to get a small percentage of that. If we were aided on the total amount, our aid would be $322,071. So right now, because of the caps that are in place, we're out $162,471 this year alone. So my question is, what are you all going to do to raise this cap up to where, at least at bare minimum, the average salary of the average teacher in that profession throughout the state, so that we can get properly aided on those itinerants that work for us?
Okay, this question's been asked to me since I've come in front of this board. We're talking about what, $30,000? It should be up at least 60,000 on this. We've talked about it. We're moving along. This is this has been here since 1991. I don't know what kind of excuses we can give you. We just got to get this. This needs to be done for today's dollars. This just doesn't work, and there's no other way of saying it but that. And we need to push this across.
Thank you. Anybody else like to chime in on it?
Yeah, and we need to leave an
And when
index
you-
for inflation. So it doesn't happen again. That's what I say about, inflation, just, it, whether it's taxes or anything else, it just over time, it undoes a decision that was made and then, basically leaves people hanging. So I don't understand it.
Okay, can I ask for one thing? Can we get some information from the districts on how much you're losing? So we can use these numbers, put together
I'll be
an
happy to
aggregate.
email over my numbers right after this meeting. I'll send mine over to you. I'm sure the other districts can pull it together as well. And I know we've talked about this a lot, but I'm hoping that we can get past the talking and into the doing stages.
Absolutely.
Mr.
And
Sherwood,
are
do you
you
think that was something
talking
we could?
about
I'm
your
sorry. Go ahead.
teachers within the special ed population? No, I just wanted to make sure that, are you addressing just those that move from building to building for special education reasons, or
Could be for any number of
all
reasons.
faculty?
It could be special education, but in our district, for example, we might have our home and careers person. We don't need a full-time person to do that, so we might share that person with another district. It could be anything, there's a whole myriad of different professionals in the district that are working and providing our students with what they need, but we don't necessarily need a full-time person to fulfill that need in our district. And I'm sure that we're nowhere near unique. I'm sure that every other district that's on here is suffering the same we are. And we just need to figure out, we're working with numbers that are incredibly old. I mean, who do you know in the educational profession that earns $30,000 a year or less that works full-time?
If I can just
Go ahead,
add.
Sandy.
Okay, sorry, Martha.
That's okay.
When it comes to, just to clarify, special education teachers actually don't, even if they're BOCES, they're going to be under your high cost aid, not under your BOCES aid. It's a separate funding stream. So I did want to clarify that. And the statewide average for CTE, which is what the language actually is, CTE, it does cover itinerants also, is actually $67,000. I'm sure it was 30,000 back when it was set in 91. Those teachers are no longer making $30,000 a year.
Mrs. Sherwood, do you think that was something, if we asked the DSs to get the information that Assemblyman Miller is asking for, is that something that would be not a huge lift to ask you three to get those numbers together for him?
We absolutely can do that for our components. I can also share, we already have, this is one of the major advocacy points for the DSs this year, because that and the fact that unfortunately the special aid that's in the budget for mental health and trauma is it's wonderful. It's in addition to the federal aid, but guess what? BOCES aren't eligible for the federal aid. Therefore, we are excluded from that aid also. And we deal with some of the most fragile children in the state, and yet we're ineligible for aid on mental health and trauma. So that's an issue when these things get passed. When they say schools and they don't say schools and BOCES, it automatically excludes BOCES. So that's another factor for BOCES. But we absolutely, from a statewide perspective, I can share the statewide data is already pulled together and ready to go. But I will have Mr. Boodleman and Dr. Kilburn pull together for their districts, and we'll get it out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Group, did you want to add something before we move on? Okay,
Nope, I'm all set. Sandy
Okay.
said it all.
thank you. Mr. Nicoteri, is he here? Oh,
I am.
I think you have a question about the tax cap and especially negative tax caps and.
Yes, Tom, thank you. I appreciate it. I'd like to take a moment to thank our panel. And I'd like to say on behalf of the Sequoia School Board, we are very, very fortunate to have the representation that we have. everyone on our panel has exhibited support for education, has made education a priority. And we dearly appreciate that. We have a question, we have a concern in regards to the tax cap, which may not gain a lot of attention this particular year because of the fact that there's the influx of federal aid last year, this year, and hopefully next year to come. But the formula and the logistics of the 2% tax cap are unfair and very inconsistent. I read last night, excuse me, I think this is the first year in 3 years that the actual 2% tax cap is a reality. Because when you factor in inflation and you factor in other contributing factors, some districts' tax cap in the past has been, I think there's been some in a negative. There's been some at 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. It's very inconsistent and unfair. And when we make a decision to go above the 2%, we're looking at 60% of our community to support that. I think that's somewhat unfair as well. So I would hope that the panel would take into consideration the 2% tax cap logistically is not 2%. It's much less. And every district in the last several years has been faced with this dilemma. As I said, hopefully this year, it may not be the significant factor it's been in the past, but in the very near future, it's going to be an issue again. And when you tell your community you're going out at 2% and they find out you're actually going out at 1%, we have to make up that difference. And it's been very difficult. So I don't know if the panel has an answer for that. It's just a matter of information that maybe they can look at it further because it's been very inconsistent and it's hurt many districts in the last several years.
I'll take that one first. We've all listened to the Keeler show and Dr. Timms was on there explaining this very, very well to everyone. I don't know if everyone was listening to it over Keeler's listening area, but yes, Tony, I agree with you on this. The public doesn't understand this. And the overriding vote should be a simple majority instead of a super majority on this. And we've talked about that for a long time.
Thank you, Brian.
I simply can't believe we're still talking about this. This has been an issue, really has been discussed since the tax cap was passed, and the inconsistencies and the lack of fairness and the inability of the tax cap to realize, what true expenses are for school districts is just it's unacceptable. It's been way too long, and the legislature really needs to get off their duff and make the tax cap predictable. That's all school superintendents and business managers are asking for. Make it predictable, make it consistent, and we'll work with it. It hasn't been all that popular because it is a cap, but still nonetheless, when you have such mixed signals on how that cap is supposed to be calculated, how can you expect to run a business like that? I just don't understand, but we understand it's an issue that needs changing ASAP. So, and Mr. Nicotera, I appreciate your input on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to agree. Thank you for the input as this has been part of the discussions over the last 2 days, similar to the conversation we're having about foundation aid formula. It's the same aspect, Mr. Nicotera, as you said, taking the numbers and trying to move them so that fit into this. It isn't something that works for you. And again, you're the ones making the decisions. I will bring it back to my conference again. As I stated, we talked about it just yesterday and continue to remind them as many are in agreement. So thank you for the input.
Thank you, Marianne.
Hey, Anthony, I got your paper right here in front of me, and I think one of the biggest questions I have for the tax cap levy limit is include pilot properties covered by payments in lieu of taxes in the tax-based growth factor. to me, that seems to be one of the biggest things that's going on. There's a lot of pilots going on out there. And I just wonder how much do these schools get involved with the pilot agreements that the IDAs and the economic people are making out there?
Brian, most of the time, zero. Oftentimes, the paper signed and the schools have no clue of what's happening. It's really shameful in that regard from a political perspective.
Okay, so how do we take care of that? Would you guys have a suggestion, a solution? The IDA should, and you guys should be talked to, because this is a huge situation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things going on. We see the Route 5 corridor down there. We see, there's a lot of businesses, a lot of new things coming in, and this is going to affect how you guys do business.
Yeah.
Immensely over the next few years, and this is going to affect, and this affects every formula we have out there, and this is never talked about to be part of the foundation formulas, or you name it. This is a huge factor here.
And Mike had over at Whitesboro, I mean, with things happening over there, that's going to be, in your area.
We find out when they have the hearing after the decision's already been made.
Yeah, okay.
That's when we
Thank you,
find
Mike.
out. We get
Okay.
invited to a hearing when it's already been decided.
So to answer the question of what we would like I believe that could be expressed as we would like a seat at the table.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
I'm a member of the Madison County IDA and I'm their finance chair. And I can guarantee you, I'm going to take that back to my IDA board, all right, about these concerns, because if in fact you aren't fully in the loop
They're
on
not,
decisions
John.
that are made that affect your budgets. I didn't know that, Jim. And I will definitely take that back to my IDA director, or at least in Madison County, and bring that point of concern up to at my next board meeting.
And John, maybe we can reach out to the Herkimer and to the Oneida County IDA people too, and see what we can, at least maybe get some kind of a gentleman's agreement that, we have a seat at the table. So
I would be glad
thank
to
you.
initiate that, Jim,
Thank you.
along with Otsego County. So good.
absolutely.
All right.
This should be, I'm ranker on real property taxation. And I'm going to bring that up in committee. I'm going to talk to Sandy Galiff on this. But there's a lot of solar projects coming in right now. And these pilots are getting pushed out, not only 10 years, but some of them
20.
we're hearing
20.
15 years. And what's going to happen here, and this needs to be discussed. And this is probably one of the biggest things that can help all of us, with everything. So let's make that an action item.
Tom Moats, this is Robert Batson. I have
Yes.
a question. I think we need to have something a bit more than a gentleman's agreement. If I had adjoining property to a gravel pit that was looking to put something in, and by state regulation, they had to notify me that they wanted to do something. I think our local municipalities have to let the schools know that are within their township, within their district, that, again, we'd love a seat at the table. We know we don't have a voice, but if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. You have to have a set of ears in that room to know how it potentially may affect you and how it affects the rest of the taxpayers in that district. We need to have something more substantial than a gentleman's agreement.
That's very true, because sometimes school taxes are the lion's share of the tax
Sure.
assessment, right? Good point.
So if I could jump in here for just a second, I agree with everything that everybody's talking about in terms of a seat at the table. And we have advocated for a seat at the table in prior years, and there are some challenges with that, given the mission, if you will, of the IDEAs. And they're really looking to try to grow the economy by offering tax relief to businesses that are coming into the region. And so it's not necessarily in their best interest to exclude the school tax, because it as it was just stated, the school tax can be a fairly significant portion of the tax bill. So there may be another approach, and that would be to take a look at how does that factor into the property tax levy limit? So that might be another way to help protect the schools from the impact without setting up a conflict between the economic development agencies and the school districts. Because frankly, I think that when they're looking to grow the businesses and the business base within that region, that's going to be a priority, and it's likely to have a greater weight than perhaps the impact on the school. And essentially, one of the things that then happens to the rest of the taxpayers in the school is that the levy is the levy and the budget is the budget. And that has an adverse effect on the taxpayers, who then have to come up with the funds to make us whole on the levy. So it does have an adverse effect on the remaining taxpayers who are having to pay those taxes, but that's it's not very transparent. And so it's not something that the members of the community are necessarily aware of. They just see their tax bill going up. So again, we may want to talk about a two-pronged approach. I think the communication is really important, and an understanding of the impact on the larger community is important, but there may be another way to go about this with the formula for the tax levy limit.
Well, one of the other things here to attract business to the area is how the schools are performing.
Correct.
And right now, we're trying to attract high-tech jobs to the area. We have the semiconductor business coming here in Marcy. So we all got to start working together and see how each action is affecting everyone.
Correct.
Anyone else want to log in on this?
I just appreciate your approach, Superintendent Group, because I think that's trying to look at it in another matter. So thank you so much.
Mr.
I took my notes like a good student, Mr. Head.
Mr. Batson.
I had a quick question that perhaps Mike Head can weigh in on. Is that since the building over at the SUNY campus that is in your district, did you guys ever hear or run any numbers about what economic impact that has and whatever tax breaks were given to them to your district?
We did not.
I suspected so. That's why I asked.
Yeah.
And you've been there a long time, so you would know, as that project is entering who knows how many decades. Thank you.
Well, they started talking about it, I think, when I was 12.
5 years ago.
I think one of the things we're looking for, any change in that tax cap regulation, whether it be the majority vote, the 2%, the pilot projects. I mean, we know that it was the baby of our friend that is no longer governor. And so if there's an opportunity to get some inroads in that, we believe it would be this year, because the creator of that is gone. You know what I'm saying? So this may be an opportunity to get some traction, because before, with him in there, we knew it wasn't even anywhere near the table. So.
Yeah, that's a good point from a timing perspective, Jim. But the idea is that it gets indexed with inflation, and not just the consumer price index, but the Fed has some very sophisticated models of overall inflation, including imports and exports, and what the true cost is for everything, right? Not just consumer goods, because we're talking about real property values. We're talking, and that thing is knowable in this day and age, sort of thing. And that the idea is and you know, that the tax cap at 2% was probably really a reduction in spending is what it was, from the previous governor. So I just think it needs to be steady. So again, all the school districts all across the state, everybody has a consistent viewpoint of, this is the amount that we've prioritized for, in this case, education. And then let's keep it consistent over time. So you all have planning, the ability to plan year to year.
Right. Yeah. Years ago, we had a great tax cap person. It was called the voters.
Right.
I think in addition to just a simple majority, there needs to be a floor. Because
Yes.
Tom Shipsky will tell you, they've
Yep.
been in negative territory before.
We paid cash for a building project, a roofing project, and that drove us negative because we didn't borrow money for it. How do you tell your people in the district that by paying cash and not borrowing money, we took a beating, and that will follow us forever because that pushed our starting point lower, that will always follow us. So I'd like to see us guarantee that you can't go negative. Thank you.
All right, moving on. I think Assemblymember Buttonshine has some good news about this. Mr. Head would like to ask about CSE litigation and the onerous costs that school districts have to sometimes be burdened with on these things. So go ahead, Mr. Head.
Yes, as Tom mentioned, Assemblywoman Buttonshine seems to be all over this. Thank you. Brian Beller must have got your ear. But to give you a little bit of background, back in 2005, the Supreme Court ruled that the party seeking relief has the burden of proof. They did put a waiver in there, however, and in New York State in 2007 became one of 7 states in the country that shifted the burden of proof back to the school districts. As a result of that, 40% of all the litigation regarding special education students and meeting their needs were in New York State. We had a district in central New York that had to produce over 10,000 documents in a request for information. So my question is this, would you be willing to propose and support legislation that would change the burden of proof for CSE litigation from the schools, who are the defendants, to the plaintiffs? This will follow the vast majority of states that have the code and law and prevent unscrupulous attorneys from filing frivolous lawsuits. Because we at Whitesboro were a victim of, there's a certain attorney in the area. And I know that I think that it was Morrisville has been on the bad end of this as well.
Yes, Sid. Thank you very much for this question. As you stated, Brian has brought this to my attention from the day that I came into office. So inviting many of the superintendents to Albany to have this discussion, and Chair Benedetto has actually met with them twice to further the conversation about how to write this legislation appropriately so it passes. And I think that we have foundation. I'm very fortunate to be willing to carry this and be a part of it. I was excited. I'm not sure if you were on early. We were talking about the hearings yesterday. And as I sit on the education committee, I have the opportunity to ask questions. And yes, my phone was blowing up from Brian Belair saying, don't forget due process. Don't forget the cost to our school districts of that burden of proof. And I knew he was listening because anyone can listen online. After we did get comments that at least the commissioner's office is willing to have those discussions, which is very important. Now, what you all know is the strength of the advocacy groups and the strength of unfortunately, many of them are not dedicated volunteers like you that sit on school boards. Many of them have, fortunately, a different mission, and their approach is to be aggressive, bully, push, try to create an environment that pushes legislators where they shouldn't go. You're fortunate. So many are strong enough to say that they're not going to listen. So this is the continuous battle that we will have, is trying to put light to the importance of how fair and equitable you are, that you, again, know your districts the best. So the question in regards to the legislation, yes, the chair, I have been working with him in regards to how to put this forward to ensure it passes. To get it out of committee is my first step. Is the legislation completely written? It is not. It is something that is continuing to be a work in progress and must be carefully drafted. But I understand, I feel your pain, and was enthusiastic yesterday. I had, I believe, 3 questions that I addressed to the commissioner, and that was the first one that she came back on, which usually they avoid it, don't talk about it. Even as the chair, Benedetto's conversations are not one that looks at it as an important process. But again, all of the districts on, similar to the data that you're collecting, if there's some incurred cost that you have, I know that Brian represented it, that it's almost like a group that preys on you, that when, and just think about it, a parent's desperate, right? They don't hear what they want, so they want to know what they want to hear. And then there's this group that says, oh, we'll get you what you want. And they know if they inundate you and ask for hundreds of copies and just keep trying to, and unfortunately, your legal team might opt to settle. So I understand that. And even if the cost can be brought forward so that we can, with the justification of the legislation, I know your intention is not to destroy any child's ability to achieve. It's about doing something right. I mean, the CSEA and that, excuse me, the CSE team that sits, I mean, you have a parent advocate, you have a teacher there, you know, you have the parents themselves that can advocate for the child. So I think it's a fair approach that comes forward. It's just a matter of putting that burden of proof on you makes no sense. It isn't logic. But in all truthfulness, you have strong advocates on the other side. And we just need to make sure it's done appropriately. I'll continue to work with the chair and Brian to move forward.
Well, I appreciate that, Assemblywoman, and I think one of the issues is too that the expense to the district could be upwards of $80,000 to $100,000. Now that's money that's not going into the very programs that these children need. So it doesn't, to me, it doesn't make sense from either side, quite frankly.
No, and again, I think that those groups, and that's what Brian described it, is they clearly know how to prey on you, which is totally unacceptable because that's all they're doing. They just know, again, you know, a parent's heart is torn because their child can't learn to the potential that they feel they could. So then this group says, oh, we'll take care of you. And again, they have, the interest is just to continue to beat and cause charges to you versus saying what's best for this child. And then, as you said, it's a lose-lose. I mean, the parent's not going to get anywhere with this child because it's, you clearly, in the money and expense that you have spent. How many other districts, by a show of hands, feel, again, they could provide quite a major cost that they see with their legal teams?
Fortunately, it's not a huge number of districts, but Morrisville, I know, I thought I saw there. Okay, Mr. Malloy there, and Hamilton, I know has gotten this. So it's a number of districts, but it's certainly a problem that's bound to grow.
And I would
Is
add,
the, go ahead.
Oneida's not here, but I know that Oneida has had similar experience as well.
And would your group again be willing to put a letter of support together to help support Mike in Morrisville and Oneida, just to talk about the importance of this? I think you're right. It's just a matter of time where this collective group just preys on any one of you.
Yeah, Assemblywoman, if that would be helpful, we certainly can get that out to you, okay? From our group.
Thank
Anybody
you,
else
Mike.
like to log in on this issue? I'm sorry, Assembly Member Buttonshine, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'll tell you just from a personal standpoint. I know of a gentleman, in fact, I worked with him on issues of special education years ago, that vowed to go to school to become a lawyer and to bring some of these schools to their knees, because he had a child with special ed that, or there was special needs that was what he felt was not treated properly. And he vowed to do exactly that, go to school, become a lawyer, and go after these schools. So I don't think he plans on stopping. And I'm sure he's not alone, because there are some lawyers, unfortunately, that see this as a big payola, and it's just not right. So there's got to be some protections in place. And Marianne, I would be glad to sit down, consider sponsorship of that bill. I think at this point, it seems like it's absolutely necessary.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to the next issue. Mr. Batson, I think you have a question about fund balance.
Yes, as soon as I turn my microphone on. Yes, the undesignated fund balance has been 4% for certainly as long as I've been on the school board, and a lot longer than that. And I was actually kind of surprised that it even had some discussion in the air in the last year or so about perhaps increasing that. For a small school like Poland, 4% is just over $600,000, which is a fairly small percent if you have some kind of emergency or legal issue, or several special needs kids that move into the district, or God forbid, a combination of those things. There was some talk, I don't know how high up it got on the table, but I'm wondering if the assembly people would be in favor of raising that to 8% or more. I see the governor spoke in her budget address of perhaps that any of these reserves for local municipalities perhaps should be in the 12 to 15% range. So even if we double what we have, we're still only halfway to what the governor suggests. But moving forward, perhaps it would be a good stepping stone moving ahead. I'm sure that Rick Timms wouldn't like to hear this, but I know that for years, school boards in general are great stewards of the taxpayers' money. And Poland, and I'm sure we're not alone on this, just before we pass our tax levy every year, for 6 or 7 years alone, we backed it up 1/4%, 0.5%, maybe even 1%. Rick Timms would, be in horrors to hear that. But as we did that for several years, we think it bought us some goodwill for the taxpayers for when we really did need something. And we were one of the districts that needed a 60% vote to get the absolute minimum and pass a capital project as well. And it was great help to us. So we'd like to hear what your thoughts are on supporting increasing the undesignated fund balance from 4% to perhaps 8% or a little higher. Thank you.
I'll chime in on that one. I was a town supervisor for 11 years, and we were hamstrung, if you will, by limits on our fund balance. I managed to do a little trick one time and put a surplus that we had from a windfall into a capital reserve fund, which takes it away from the radar a little bit, and you can still have it for designated funds. but it's been unrealistic for years how low the state expects you to have for a rainy day fund. And I would definitely be a proponent to raise that to anywhere between 10 and 15%, or whatever actually the school can justify it needs for projected expenses. Give them the flexibility to be able to put those monies aside that they feel they're going to need, again, for the rainy day fund and for sometimes unanticipated costs like, you know, special needs kid, or, you know, a bus that needs to be replaced right away, or repairs that need to be done. And I know all those can be separate line items too, but I would definitely be a proponent and an advocate for raising that limit. So it's a great idea.
I
I
agree.
support it also.
Yeah.
I guess everything's been said here. It seems like every piece that we've been talking about all goes back to the foundation formula and how we do things. And I think all these things have to be part of that discussion along with that.
Thank you.
Well, we'll see if we can change that a little bit, something that's a little bit off the foundation formula. Mike Clemens has a question about polling locations. From
Yes,
Tyler.
I'd like to thank the representatives of the assembly to be with us tonight. It's been a really good exchange tonight so far, so thank you. It has to do with polling locations. You know, certainly districts have spent a lot of money making the schools a lot safer, adding money, sometimes not knowing where they're going to get it. But would you support schools being allowed to decline the use of their buildings for polling locations?
Polling locations for general elections or?
General elections.
Absolutely. You know, this should be worked out between the schools and the county board of elections. And have you guys had issues with that?
We don't have the option of saying no.
You don't?
If the
Okay, I didn't know.
municipality says that they want to have election in our school, we can't say no. And it presents security issues. It presents all sorts of issues. Some schools have had to shut down instruction for a day because of that. So it's out of our control.
Yeah, no, I understand all the issues because my office used to be in the BOCES up there and people coming in and out and all that. And we just had just one office, but every day. Absolutely. If we could do something for you guys to not allow that, and if that was your choice, that works.
I know there is legislation to that that has been discussed in regards to clearly providing that is not an option for a polling place. To Brian's point, primarily in Oneida County, it was asked. And if you said no, you know, but again, you need to be at the table. I'm hearing this over and over again this evening. The most important aspect is if you're there and can provide the discussion of why you don't. And many of the polling places had been moved for many reasons that you've talked about. Is that, you know, it's not an option for you not to, as Tom said, you have to be able to say no. There's times you just can't do everything. And in this situation, as you said, the security number one has got to be the most concerning in regards to how can this be done appropriately. I mean, you cover so much. So I will definitely look into that, and I'm sure everyone on here will support what is needed in regards to how can that. But I know those discussions happened last year, and I thought it already passed. So I will double. Maybe it didn't go through the Senate. Maybe the governor vetoed it. But I do recall us having these discussions, as well as the importance of schools not being a part of polling.
Now, has discussion been asked about ADA accessible and things like that? I don't know if all the communities have some place where they could have a polling place. I'm just, in available parking. I don't know the situations all over. But, there could be some situations why, I'm just looking at both sides of this, why the schools would be asked to be a polling place, and maybe we'd have to think about that and, how the school could be more secure if that was the only option they had in that area.
But, notwithstanding the fact that now we give people like a bazillion days before election day to vote, we have no excuse absentee balloting. So I think that the numbers of people that were using a facility when election day was just one day was much higher. So it seems to me that logistically, a community could find a different place to vote. And again, we've made it so easy for people to vote and given them so much time that if they couldn't make it to a more remote area or a place they're not used to, they could just vote by absentee or vote early. So yeah. And then, of course, with COVID and everything else, I know that's a strong consideration right now about all kinds of people coming into a school. So yeah, I think that should be something that you should have the latitude to be able to decide on.
Absolutely. In Whitesboro, they actually used a restaurant. Hartzell Inn was used as a polling. I mean, they're always compensated any place, so they utilized Hartzell Inn.
Great. Move on to the next question. I have the next question, actually. New York currently has 57 districts that are designated as small city school districts. New York state law defines small city school districts as districts with a city of less than 125,000 inhabitants. In the Mohawk Valley, that includes Little Falls, Oneida, Rome, Utica, and VVS. Currently, small city schools are not held to the same debt limit regulations as other school districts. I propose and would like you to support holding small city schools to the same maximal debt limit of 10% of the most recent evaluation, like all other schools are held to. And also to allow small city schools to exclude state aid payments to offset bond payments from their current net debt, as other schools are currently doing. The combination of those two things really limits what we can do for building and what we can do to serve our students. So wondering if anybody has any comments about that.
I hope you're going to send that in writing to me, right?
Again, yes.
I have to give that some thought.
Okay.
No.
No.
Send a copy to me too.
Yes, if everyone has it. I mean, I think more importantly is, again, best. And if we could just continue with that theme, is that when you come forward with the ideas that are going to support you, this is what we need to do, and we'll do it. I mean, and I find that that's the logic. It makes sense. I know we were talking in regards to purchases for transportation. I mean, they doubled it. It used to be, I believe it was 350,000 that they could make those purchases without coming forward for the request. Now it went to 7,000 or 700,000, excuse me. So these are things that are happening and can be proposed. You need those same latitude that needs to happen. Our small municipalities had talked about, and it was kind of difficult for some of my colleagues to realize that $700,000. They said, boy, that's a lot of money. And I said, I mean, have you bought a dump truck lately? I mean, I don't buy them, but I'm sure I know what the car costs. And we're talking about a snowplow or something, and to continue to report back and forth to the state is just, I know that many of the superintendents had said, financially, having someone keep track of everything is so expensive that there's so many times you don't even want to participate, because the paperwork is going to be outweigh the gains that you're going to get. through any cost benefit analysis. So sure, absolutely, but send that to me so I make sure I don't mess that up.
We will do that. We'll add that to our homework assignments.
Okay, I
Thank
got a
you.
question on this.
Yeah.
Is there a relationship between the small city schools, the economic levels in those surrounding districts, and the combined wealth ratio formula?
My understanding is no, it's based strictly on the, having a small, a city within the jurisdiction of your, of your school district. So, I mean, BVS, we've got Vernon, Verona, but Cheryl's puts us in that small city schools category.
Okay.
This is currently affecting a BOCES building project right now, Herkimer BOCES. Little Falls School District is running into this. They're at their debt limit and now they've got to jump through all kinds of hoops and have a double vote and everything in order for us to have our BOCES to participate in the BOCES building project. So it's something that's actually impacting us right now.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. I knew that this was affecting Little Falls. Thank you for contributing that. And we will pull some of this together and send it out to you, to everybody. Next question we have is about increased flexibility to allow superintendents and to hire teachers. And I'll turn that over to Mr. Shipsky. I think you had that question.
I did. One of the things that is tough in little schools where we don't have a real big student enrollment is to be able to use our teachers effectively. In a lot of areas, their teachers aren't available, tech teachers, some of the science teachers or whatever. And if we could loosen up some of the, and I know Assemblywoman Buttonshaw talked about that, some of the certifications, and I guess the governor did talk about that a little bit, that some of these people can get cross-certified. We're not asking for a kindergarten teacher to teach physics, but in a lot of cases you have math and science teachers that possibly could teach physics and some other things like that. We can't afford to go out and hire just a physics teacher when in a little school like ours where you might have 5 kids going to take physics, but you may have a math teacher that is more than qualified. And I believe in special ed, there are some certification limitations of what they can do. So if we can kind of free up the certification business a little bit, in a little schools, that'll help us a lot. We can move our people around, and we could possibly hire some other people that could do things for us. Thank you.
And I think to give superintendents the latitude to authorize that for a limited period of time. And then also, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Was this used during the COVID, right now during COVID crisis, right? Was this allowed?
Yeah, but all the time, this is a problem,
No, I know, but we've
it's
already.
Worse now because we've seen a real shortage of teachers and we've had teachers that can't work for whatever reason. But I see this moving forward is going to be a problem for a long time.
Okay.
One change that is coming forward through local governments, and the governor is stated that she will approve it, is anyone that's in retirement that wants to come back, there is no cap for teaching. And I know that's not going to help you with what you're talking about, other than it does open up somewhat of a door. I mean, it's an Article 7 in this budget cycle. So it talks of the need of teachers, and that someone that might be retired, you run into that cap issue. So they waive the cap. So it's one little step, but I understand what you're talking about, and it's very important. Not only in small schools, but when you talk about specialized courses like physics, I know that could be an issue in many districts.
I read somewhere that for each technology teacher that's graduating from college, 2 teachers are retiring. And there just aren't enough.
Yeah, Tom, and I think what you're seeing too is what we're seeing across the spectrum of businesses in New York State is a brain drain. All right, we've seen, in fact, over the past year, we've had over 300,000 people leave New York State for whatever reason. We know it's not the weather. All right, so you're kind of swiftly picking up and leaving New York. So another discussion, obviously, is how do we keep these people here? In particular, how do we keep young people here? Because that's where our real potential is. How do we get young people to invest their lives in upstate New York, you know, in education and medicine and all that? And there is a very robust discussion going on about that right now. So again, that's a problem too, is there's the people simply aren't there. So and as far as addressing cross certification, we all know how difficult it is to get state ed to move on these kind of things and how slow that process can be. So that in itself is a part of the challenge, I'm sure.
And we can compete with industry. You know, when a college student graduates with a chemistry or biology degree or a physics degree, and we want to offer them $36,000 to come to teach, and industry is going to offer them $85,000 to teach, we're dead in the water. You know, maybe we need to look at being able to use adjunct teachers, especially now with the technology we have for remote learning or whatever. Why can't a research, you know, the scientist somewhere teach an advanced course in one of our schools? I mean, we've been doing that at the university level for years. If they could get certified to teach, you know, advanced physics, somebody who's working at Rome, or a doctor at one of the hospitals could jump in and help and teach a class maybe with our LPN program. They're certainly qualified, but we can't hire them.
Gotta have that good broadband.
And yes, but even, I mean, to teach within our school, you know, what with we've got the technology, you know, we're still doing what we did 50 years ago and not looking at the opportunities that are ahead. And this is a case with certification that would help us dramatically.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for bringing that up.
This is Robert Batson from Poland. Also going along with this, we need an echoed voice to, I don't know exactly what's in state law, but we certainly need to be able to look extra lean for state ed. It's not just this. We need, and I think the superintendents and the principals need the flexibility to say, look, if for a year with declining enrollment, we need to perhaps shift a sixth grade teacher up to middle school for a year. We need to not have it held against the teacher for putting them on a new tenure track and scaring them that all of a sudden you're on a brand new track. We need to say, look, we're going to hold you harmless for a year because nobody is going to know better than the superintendents or the principals, and talking with the teacher to say, look, if you can just get by, help us out here for a year, maybe two, as this bigger class moves through and move up and then move back, we're not going to hold anything against you. We don't need you to put you on a new tenure track, but we need a little bit larger voice to help us with state ed to open up some avenues of opportunity for our administrators.
Can I address this just a little bit around certification?
Please.
So I'm the chair of the statewide committee that works with SED on certification, and there are actually quite a few of the things you've discussed are actually moving through the Board of Regents as emergency actions. So in February, you're going to see an emergency regulation that then will go out for comment and would eventually become permanent, but emergency lets you put it in place quicker, so that a secondary science teacher, let's just use your example of we'll use chemistry. If they're chemistry certified, right now the regulation would be that they would need another 30 hours in the other content area to get certified, like in physics. They will reduce that to the 18 hours. So essentially it would be 6 classes. So they are looking at, for content area, they're looking at making that easier. They're looking at, again, in February, the Board of Regents will review changing the literacy certification to simply be PK-12. instead of broken down in chunks. And that's laying the foundation for then in March, perhaps to suggest that special ed should go back to being PK-12, because that coming to your, Mr. Batson was just saying, you want a sixth grade teacher who needs to teach secondary for 1 year. That's been a huge issue in special education when they started to narrow those bands. There is COVID certification right now, which is a 2-year certification, but it buys you time to get other certifications. So it does allow you to hire teachers that haven't even finished the whole process. And it gives them time to finish the process. It's a 2-year certification. But you're absolutely right. I mean, this has taken far too long. We've been pushing this for a while. But if you've been watching the Board of Regents meetings, you'll see that those certification changes have been coming through. We are in a good climate right now. The teacher shortage is huge across the entire state, not just in our region. Part of that comes from the vilification of public schools from about 10 years ago. So we had a crop of young people who basically, why would you want to do that? Schools were an awful place. They did an awful job. And we all know, I mean, it was this public schools took a bashing a couple years, about 10 years ago. So we've got to rebuild that. The nice thing is the young people that are coming out of high school and entering college right now have very much a service mentality. They want to make a difference. They have passion and they're enthusiastic. That's potential teachers right there. So hopefully we can capture some of those wonderful young people who are coming out and start building back up our teacher base. In the meantime, there should be a lot more flexibility. So we're working on it, but it is much too slow.
Thank you. I'll have the next question. When we talked earlier tonight about how dramatically education has been changing for all of us. When we ask teachers, what's the number one thing that you need to help to de-stress, to do a better job? The number one answer that we hear over and over again from teachers is they need time. Time to do training, time to figure out how to make these changes. Right now, we're required to have 180 instructional days starting September 1st and ending by Regents Grading Day in June. It would be very, very helpful to us, and this is a non-budgetary item, to allow us to start school a week or 2 weeks earlier on a district basis. This would be something that would help us to build in some more training days for teachers, and wondering if this is be something that you'd be willing to support.
So it'd still be the same amount of days school year. It just start earlier.
Start earlier so we can have more training days for the teachers, more time for them to network with each other and to figure out how to make these changes that we're asking them to make.
And you don't see a budgetary increase with them being there?
No, because it'd be up to us. Now, I see Sandy. Sandy, do you want to chime in on this? You apparently have some new information here, I guess.
Yeah, they amended the regulations, the 180-day regulations, the same time they put in the 990 hour regulation. And they made it so that the last 2 weeks of August are permissible within the school year to count as instructional days. So that's why you're starting to see schools put in days like August 30th and August 31st are PD days. And that way schools can start right the day after Labor Day. Some schools have even started before Labor Day, but they did amend that to allow the last 2 weeks in August.
Thank you. I did not know that. Thank you for adding that. We're done with the prepared questions for people that have showed up tonight. I'd leave it open to, we have a couple more minutes. Is there anybody else that would like to make any comments before we dismiss anybody? I think this has been a wonderful session, lots of exchange of good information. Is there anybody that would like to ask a question?
Tom, I got a text from Dr. Belair regarding the burden of proof. He's unable to unmute his computer for some reason. So, but he said he'd be happy to volunteer for any group that wants to work on any kind of paper to go forward to the legislature.
Dr. Belair, I think you were already penciled in on that group. Yeah.
Yeah, we already signed him up, Mike.
Yeah.
Listen, Tom, just before we go, just, again, thank you to our legislators. I think it was, again, a great sharing of information. Just a couple of things SBI wise. We will have the senators, our Senator Griffo, Oberacker, and Senator May on February 10th. I know, we had to change it, unfortunately, but we will be running that program on the 10th of February. I know a couple of schools have board meetings, but that was the only date we had available. And then the other piece is Rick Timms is going to do a workshop for us on our state aid packages, options to consider as we go through the budget cycles, not only for this year, but also next year and the following year. So and that's going to be on February 16th, again, through Zoom. Okay. And again, our legislative committee will be working on those metrics for what we would like to see in a revised foundation aid formula. So then we will have that to our legislators. So thank you, Tom, on that end.
Tom, I do have one more question.
Please.
How does it look with the new governor as far as getting some changes made? Is she open to some changes? I mean, I doubt if she was even in the room the last budget that was created. I mean, this is all new to her. Is it looking positive? I guess that's my question.
I think, again, when you look at the executive budget that came forward for education, you do see not a lot of tug of war that has to start initially. But as I had opened this evening, I'm concerned that you have the money that you need to continue to progress forward in regards to what needs to happen. UPK is one of her big initiatives. And I have heard from districts that I represent that, of course, everyone would like to see universal pre-K. However, is the funding going to stay? You want to make sure that, and many of you, when I have reached out and said, boy, there's all these grants for UPK, and you're like, thanks, Marianne, but no thanks, because I know what's going to happen in 2 years, is that then it's going to become a burden of the districts. So a great initiative. Of course, we want, the younger we can intervene in a child's life, we probably, you're the experts, you know this, you could be telling me this. So I have to say that the concerns, fully foundation aid funding, right? Everyone, we just heard Mr. Van Wormer talk about, well, we're going to have a discussion about this. So, I mean, I have to say that ideas that came forward, probably one that's concerning to me is your Nutrition New York is going to the Department of Ag. And the commissioner had talked about that, SED, who had been a part of this. Now, listen, maybe, Commissioner Ball's a great guy and maybe everything's going to work, but I am concerned about the students. And did any one of you have any conversation or input on this? And that's what I asked yesterday. So you're moving a program from one state agency to another. I want to know what you said about it. And these are the type of things that I am concerned. I have to say that my interaction with her when she was lieutenant governor was inquisitive. She wanted to hear about it. She just wasn't ceremonial. But at the same point, when you look at the pluses and minuses that we see, there isn't, as all of you have looked at this, there's negatives. There's negatives in some areas that you're going to say to yourself, how am I going to handle this? Special ed is one, the busing is another one. With your transportation, there's a waiver, but what happens? Another concern, special services, the full day kindergarten, categorical grants. How many of you are part of those? There's a decrease of $7 million. I don't know yet. So I guess in this sense, I will always work with everyone, keep the dialogue open. But I think that you're your best advocates coming together with what needs to be done. And I mean, I see Sandy's, she's in tune with it. when we talk about the certifications and the ability to do the dual certifications and all this great stuff, but SED needs the staff to process those. You guys can't be saying, I need someone to be dual. And then the next thing you know, she says she's down 10 staff members and that certification will be processed in 4 months. I mean, you can't have that. So to make sure that she has the administrative staff, if we're going to talk about changing certifications, we want to make sure that her staff has the ability to do that for all of you. So those are kind of the questions we're asking. And I'm optimistic because I think that looking at it as a positive is important, but I'm very cautious because I want to make sure as we talk about so many programs, how do we ensure that they're steadfast and supported? Transportation, as many of you small districts, you talk about this all the time, how many miles that you cover in one district, where others that are in my conference don't really understand that. So I spend a lot of time with those conversations. So I think I overdid but I just am concerned about those.
It's also staffing concerns about with so many programs, so many schools are going to be having projects going through using the state money. There's a backlog long before COVID. So it's not just staffing of looking at the teachers, it's staffing to get these projects moving forward.
Yes.
And so the SED staffing, I think one thing that perhaps you can push back that would be helpful is I believe SED, so under Governor Cuomo, 700 plus positions were lost because as people left, he wouldn't allow them to be filled.
Correct.
So SED requested 300 positions of those 700. I believe 100 something, 108 or 180, I'm sorry, are in the budget, but they're in the governor's budget in very particular that, she wants them in this office and in that office. And the problem is that some of the slowdown, some of the issues in the state education department have to do with technology. And they need to upgrade their technology, which takes people in the back end. And all she wants to do is fund front end. So it would probably be wiser if you pushed back a little bit and said, let's fund positions. But coming back to what you've said on a couple different occasions, perhaps the agency should have some control over what positions they fill. Maybe it shouldn't be directed down to that level of minutia by someone outside the agency that can't see the full depth of need. Because if we fund all these front end positions, but they've got no back end, they have nothing to support them. So certification office, one of the issues is they need a whole new system. And there's no money for that. So that's kind of one of the ancillary. I do have a question about electric bus though. The electric busing is becoming a regulation. My concern is there correlation in the budget to support municipalities making their electrical output? For so many of our municipalities, they create their own electricity. Is there funding for them to get more robust? Because if we need to put in all these electrical charging stations, our municipalities need to be able to produce more electricity, preferably not by using gas generators. So is there money in the budget? If you're going to have schools go electric bus, are you ramping up the money to the municipalities so that they can put them in a more robust electrical system?
That's a great question, Sandy. We had this conversation earlier today at length. No. We voted on a bill the other day to mandate this for 2035. And there's a huge cost to the schools, and this one question or one request I'm going to have, if you were to switch out your entire fleet in 5 years or 10 years, how much would it cost each school? In an aggregate, it's going to be probably we're talking of 500 million, more than that probably. That's the things we need to do, and we need to know what the electrification charging infrastructure is going to be in the schools too, and if we can handle it through our grid. There's all kinds of questions on this, and we had a long debate on it the other day, which they've they've cut down our debate time, so we can't go back and ask other questions, but this, these questions have to be asked, and we have to press forward on this. This is a great idea. We all want to go to a cleaner environment, but we need to do it in some way that it's going to be feasible in the rural districts. How are you going to travel all those things? But if you can get us some figures on what it would, just a figure maybe from Mount Markham or Sequoia Valley or anybody here, Richfield Springs, what it would cost to totally change over your fleet, and what's that going to cost? And we can ask those questions. Where's the money going to come from?
I think one of the original questions was regarding the budget, and our previous governor used to use the budget as a document to push his policies and his agenda. And I guess every budget is essentially that in a lot of respects. But I'm going to be guardedly optimistic with this new governor that she's going to be more focused on what a budget is about, and it's a financial document more than a policy document. From what I understand, they've even said that they're going to try to stay away from policy as much as possible. I don't see how you could eliminate having some policy integrated into a budget that's funded by the taxpayers and that's guided by politicians. So we're going to be very vigilant on this budget, of course, because it's a budget by a new governor. Andrew Cuomo was the devil we knew. So we're going to be anticipating that, we all know what the balance of power is in New York State, heavily influenced by downstate interests. So, but you can count on us to fight for upstate New York and what we deserve. But this should be a very, very interesting budget year. It looks like, to me, if I was a betting man, I'd say we're probably going to get an on-time budget. We'll get an on-time budget because that's what the taxpayers have been used to seeing, and I think it's attainable. It's an incredibly complex document. I'm very concerned about its effects on healthcare because that's my background. But we're gonna watch this carefully, work wherever we can or need to with the governor and the budget office. I was encouraged that she kept Robert Mojica around. The guy's a genius. He knows that budget very, very well. So I'm it's a wait and see, fight for what we need to fight for, and move on. That's my 2 cents.
Anybody else
Okay.
have anything to say before I dismiss everybody? Or I think this has been wonderful. I think this has been a great conversation, one of the best ones that we've had. Once again, I'd like to thank all of our assembly people for the generous allocation of your time and your honesty and your frankness, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much. Give it a big round of applause.
I just want to thank all of you for all that you do, and I want to tell Mike Head, I didn't mute Doc Blair.
He's got a PhD and he can't figure out how to unmute his computer.
I'm not taking the hit for that. I know you can. Thank you again for all you do.
Thank you.
Be safe, be healthy.
Thank you. Thank you,
Just have one
everybody.
more request. If we can we do this a couple, 3 times a year so we can talk about where we are and how we move forward?
Assemblyman Miller, I've got that down as part of our homework. We
Thank
will
you.
get dates available for 4 meetings a year in your office with limited topics. Okay,
Got a nice conference table right here. Thank
fair
you.
enough. Thank you.
That'd be really good, very beneficial, so we can keep the conversation flowing, throughout the not only the
That's
budget
right.
time, but year
Yeah.
round.
And thank you for your help too.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you, John.
Thank you,
All right.
everybody. Good night.
Good night,
Good
Mike
night,
and Robert. Thank you.
Yep.
Good night, everyone.